Aloha, this is in response to the video on coordination. I really liked the title of the article because coordination in my mind suggests movement, and I'm a dancer. I love dancing, and so that was something I was able to tie this process of communication to in my mind and to help me understand, because I'm not a very coordinated person. I tend to fall over, I trip over my own feet, but I've been told that I'm a good dancer because I know how to follow when a guy leads, and I can only dance as well as my partner, so I've got different levels of ability to dance, and depending on who I'm dancing with. And the same thing kind of happens in communication. We can only communicate with another person when they follow similar rules as us, or it's easier to do so when they follow similar rules as us. And if they follow different rules, then we need to become a little bit more coordinated in a sense, and learn their rules and how we can better communicate. For example, in dancing, when I'm dancing with someone, there are two different ways that a guy can lead. He can either think up moves as he's going along and try and choreograph the dance as he goes along, or I've danced with some guys who don't really know what they're doing, they just kind of follow the music. And so I'm following them as they follow the music. That's my personal preference as to a style of dancing. But because I've also studied dancing and taken dance classes, and I know the moves, I can follow someone who is choreographing as they go along. And so I have this ability to dance these different styles, and I've been told that that's what makes me a good dancer. I still give all the credit to the guy, really, I just kind of follow. But it makes dancing fun for me, and when we follow those same rules, we can make communication a little bit more fun, a little bit more easy. There is an example in the reading about Pat, Mike, and Ellsworth, and how Pat and Mike were able to communicate very well according to these rules. They used shapes to kind of exemplify a conversation. But the second time they met, even though they were following the same rules, the conversation didn't go quite as well. It was a little bit more boring. They used mostly circles and squares instead of triangles and stars. Had they been able to think through a little bit more clearly and plan ahead, I guess, in a sense, they might have been able to have another really good conversation. And they each had different rules. Both were very complex. But when Pat met Ellsworth, Ellsworth has a very simple set of rules. He has a very limited ability to change shapes. For every shape that he had, he was given one other option instead of 4 or 5 options as were Pat and Mike. But Pat was still able to have a good conversation and get a variety of shapes in, because she was the one putting in the new shapes. Kind of makes more sense when it's a visual thing. That's why I liked the dancing visual so much. That was easier for me to understand. But in order to have this better coordination and better communication, the article seemed to suggest a new way of thinking. A lot of the terms that he tried to define within this article were very ambiguous. They didn't, there was no specific "this is this," but that kind of followed the way that he was suggesting in the article, to move from what it is to what it does. And in order to do that, scratch that, never mind. Going from what it is to what it does. He talked about an example on Easter Island. There are these large statues, and people have been trying for years to figure out what it is, what their purpose is. And it wasn't until someone came up and asked the locals, "Hey, can you make another one of those?" And they said, "Sure." And they were able to see them built, and were able to gain a better understanding because of this change of thinking, not focusing so much on what it is as to what it does, how it affects us in our daily life, how it affected these locals to make this new statue, as opposed to just trying to figure out its definition in a sense. So it was a very fun article to read and to gain a better understanding of some of the rules of communication that we aren't always aware about, and how we can communicate better.